if you know, but I don't really like doing introductions. But so my first, I don't, this is really not, I don't like the whole interview based style, but which this is basically is an interview based. But, I guess my first question though, and just so we can all get a little bit to know about you is that, you're a human potential developer is what the first thing that, and I've never heard of that before. So I kind of obviously got a little bit of an idea of what it is, but why don't you go ahead and maybe explain what that is and do a little small brief about yourself so the listeners and everybody knows what's going on here. How about that?
I will do that. Yes. Thank you. I made that up, Chris, to be quite honest with you. So I know that I've spent my entire career helping to develop others, and I've been passionate about that. And so I thought, okay, well, when you go on LinkedIn, it says, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a human potential developer. That's it. I have friends and family members that are developers, like actual developers of communities and such. And I'm like, wait a minute, I develop human potential. And that's what I do. So I took that track, or I got to that place through many leadership positions. And early on, I was a leader in the hospitality industry, specifically with Four Seasons hotels for a while.
Okay.
And then I had my own business from 95 to 2010 and loved that. So I did coaching, consulting, specifically in like the very, very high-end hotels and resorts in the United States. So that was cool because I would do a shopper's experience first. So I'd go and, have a drink at the bar and eat some dinner and have a spa treatment and then write a report.
Like a mystery shopper.
Right. So that all started. It was all good. So I did that when my kids were little. And that was a really happy thing because my kids were little and I got to go away and have these experiences. Right? So, and then lo and behold, I was using my skill set to really kind of improve the experience for the rich and famous because I was in that very, very high niche. And I got invited into healthcare. So long story short, I lived in Missoula, Montana, and one of the two small hospitals there said, we want you to work at the hospital. And I thought, I don't have any actual healthcare experience, but they wanted me to take a senior leader role in order to improve the patient experience, the employee experience, and the physician experience. And I was like, okay, I got that. And I love the idea that I would then use my skill set to improve those things, to improve those experiences across the board. And I did that for 10 years. I loved it.
So growing up, did you see yourself being in one of these roles, developing humans and working in the hospitality industry? Is that something you always wanted to do? Or is this something kind of where your life path just happened to take you?
Oh, yeah, it just took me there. So I was meant to take over my dad's company. And there are probably a lot of listeners out there that find themselves in that boat, right? Where you're like, sure, that's the right thing. That's what I should do. But then, so I would have needed an engineering degree. I was about to go to university for engineering and stopped short right at the last minute and said, yeah, no. And so, okay, at that time, it was the 80s. It was very much a man's world. I would have been like, my dad's company that I worked for years, I was the only woman. And I ended up doing, I loved it. And I loved doing like procurement for him. I worked with the purchasing director, and I'd call up and be ordering steel and all these things, wing nuts, trying hard not to be a wing nut. Yeah, but it was a very different world. And it's not one that I saw myself in long term. So how I get to hospitality is, in college. And then when I moved to San Francisco, I was waiting tables. Next thing you know, they said, we want you to be the manager. I was like, okay, cool. That sounds cool. I was 21.
Yeah. I always think about, how life can be just I don't want to say odd, but just you never know where it's really going to take you because, if everything would have went right, I was kind of set up for that. My dad he's a dairy farmer and, the whole family, it's just always been handed down. But my parents ended up getting divorced when I was real young and it just never happened for me. So it's one of those things, it's just always think about, well, how much my life would have changed if they would have stayed together. Would I be doing this right now? Would I be out on the, farm right now trying to, round up cows or, whatever, and I never had any experience with that. And some part of it is just, I guess the whole point is just, you never know where life's going to take you. And just, and just right now, I went to college and got my master's degree and all that good stuff, but ended up not going down the road that I went and got my degrees in. So it's just, it's just odd that, it's just, I don't know if it's a universe that puts you in a place where you need to be, or if it's just how life works out for you, if you just take the opportunities that come about. But yeah, I don't know why you were talking. That's what I kept thinking about. I really have another question for you, but it's just odd, I guess. It's just wild.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So my kids are 24 and 25, and I know there's a statistic. I just don't know what it is. To what you were talking about, the percentage of people that end up in the job related to what they went to school for. Like, I don't think it's a huge number.
I wouldn't think so.
No,
especially in today's times.
Right. That's right. And that's the other thing. So my father started this company, and he was in it for, I don't know, like my lifetime, like 30. He's still doing it. And he's in his 80s, but he does. So he works for the son of his partner. So I don't step up, but his partner's son steps up. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then he takes over the business and then spins it off into another business. And my father still does some sales for him and such. And even though he's in his 80s, but it keeps him young, and it keeps him going. And so he did, I think that's a real difference now in today's age. He did the same thing for decades upon decades upon decades. And, for me, like I've already told you, hospitality, healthcare, and then in between, my own business, which now is morphed to coaching in all industries. So I coach leaders in Fortune 500 companies. I've started hosting retreats. And so I agree with you. It just sort of morphs. It's just like the door opens, go through it. That's my premise.
in those experiences, so you gather a lot of different, I don't want to say obviously leadership skills and morals and values, and you get to learn like what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And, when I was going through college, it was always, and even when I first got my full-time job, we would always have these leadership retreats, and, and you would find out like, the differences and, a servant leadership and an autocratic and obviously dictator and stuff. And you're like, well, which one are you? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I've never really, been a manager. I've never really been a leader. I don't, and I didn't even see myself as a leader then. And I'm not saying I see myself as one now, but as far as the skills that are applicable to it, that, it's just hard for me to hone in on, what worked for me then or whatever. I mean, the closest thing I ever had when I worked in, when I was going to college, I worked at Walmart and I was a cashier manager or whatever you call it. And that was my first leadership taste. And that was me actually learning, like, if you had a bad experience with an employee or whatever, just you wouldn't let them go to a break or something. It's like, could have done that one better. So that's one thing you just learn from your mistakes. But yeah, it's just never knew how much emphasis plays into leadership nowadays, and I guess, or it just wasn't, or I just, just blew over it, just didn't even realize it. But yeah, and these experiences, just, you learn from it.
Yeah, well, and your experience is what happens all the time is that you're so seldomly are people that they're put into leadership positions without the training, right? So that's like the way. Exactly. And yeah, I mean, that seriously, I've built a career because that's the way, okay. Right?
That's what I've experienced. That's exactly what I've experienced.
That's right, because it's needed. And, when I say human potential developer, in my heart, I want to help anybody be the best who they can be. If that could be the stay-at-home mom, that could be, whomever it ends up, I make my living coaching executives, or, at really different levels of leaders, but a lot of executives. But the reality is, in my heart of hearts, I probably talk mainly to that leader, like you were talking about, very first time they've ever been a people manager. That's the person that I really would love to help. So yeah, it's just because it's not easy, and there's so little training in that at that level, right? So in the hospital setting, this is what happens. So the charge nurse is the person who's in charge of the unit, right? Like let's say the ICU or what have you. And you know how people get to be charge nurse? The charge nurse is like out sick or quits or something. And then the person who picks up their phone on Sunday night, who answers the phone and they say, can you come in? Yeah. Next thing you know, you're it. Yep. You're it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things, I didn't have that experience, but even just when I got my first professional job, I was overseeing a staff. I work in higher education, and I was overseeing a staff, I think I had 15 or 20 employees, student employees at a time. And I was an evening and weekend night manager. And, I walk in my first day and got the job or whatever, walk in my actual first day. And they put me downstairs, and my boss like, well, here you go. This is you now. I was like, wait, where are you going? And She left for the day. And I was like, well, okay. So now it's like, sink or swim at this point. And that's when I was like, well, got to start learning here. And just, my point is that, I've read books on leadership and stuff before, especially in college, like I was saying. And, I don't know if even podcasts were around then. That was probably 2009. Probably just early started podcasting. But, I had no idea what I was doing. And just, there was a lot of situations that, didn't go exactly how I want them to, but I've had, good situations and bad situations. So someone like you to at least give me, a guide, somewhat of a guide that's, well, maybe you should try this, maybe on this next time here, let's reflect here and see what worked, what didn't work, and just, give me some idea, and just instead of, kind of throw you to the wolves kind of thing. And I don't want to completely, just trash that, because there is probably some good things to that, because I did have to learn what worked and it didn't work, and somebody wasn't holding my hand. But yeah, just wish, I guess for the most part, it would be nice to at least have some idea,
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to tell you about 6 things that I boiled it down to.
Oh, okay.
How about if we do that? All right.
Do it.
So I boiled it down to what I call the 6 personas of a thriving leader.
Okay.
So here's number 1. Number 1 is that they're the ambassador of the culture. So what's that mean? That person lives, the leader lives the values, speaks to the values, speaks to the strengths of the individuals. So that's the part that, a lot of new leaders don't get. Like, sometimes you think, oh, I have to be the boss, so I have to have all the answers. And that's actually not true. You're going to be the greatest leader when you're leveraging the strengths of everybody else on the team, right?
Sure.
So that ambassador of the culture, the one that holds right together, right? And I like to say, because I was in Montana for so long, the one that gets everybody pulling on the same rope.
Makes sense.
And the rope being the values, right?
Sure.
So the next one is leader as coach. So that's the leader is able to step up and have those difficult conversations, hold people accountable, hold one-on-one meetings, give recognition where it's due routinely, tie that recognition back to values. And it kind of goes on and on, but I'm just going to give you an overview here.
That's fine.
So, leader as coach. The next is what I like to call the chaotic agent. So that continual change agent who can make order out of the chaos. When I was younger as a leader, people would talk about, well, we're at a place of great change. And now that I'm the age I'm in, I'm like, wait a minute, when have we never been at a place of great change? Like, we used to talk about it as like, well, the times are changing. I'm like, wait a minute, they're always changing. So you've got it. The leader needs to be somebody who can embrace change, and it doesn't ruffle their feathers at all. They kind of revel in it even, right? So number 4 is life integrator. So the great leader integrates all aspects of their life. So they're able to say, my friends, my family, and my spirituality, my everything is important to me, and I'm gonna not meander, but I'm gonna navigate through all those things as appropriate and prioritize them as appropriate, right?
Sure.
So emotionally and intuitively intelligent. So this is actually a persona for the leader in the 21st century. Really you have to be an active listener. You have to have really good self or situational awareness. So you're attuned to cues at all times about what's going on with others, whether those are clients, customers, or your employees and such. So really tuning into your emotional and intuitive intelligence. Last but not least is what I call the proactive and productive juggler. So most leaders go about their day spinning in circles and being reactive, putting out fires. I mean, you hear that all the time, right? Putting out fires. So it's when you pull all these other things together that you get to be proactive. You get to lead in a proactive way and get ahead of the game at all times. And so they're sort of in the right order. You've got to be that ambassador of the culture to begin with. And then you gets to the place where now you can be proactive. I'm not going to say all the time, but let's go 9 out of 10 situations.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of those actually resonated with me. And we'll start on here. I'll start on the last one. So I wrote these down as you talked about them. And I'll start on the last one just because that was one of the most ones I even use now with my current position, because okay, so I work in IT right now in higher education, and sometimes they need let's just say a terminal, a computer, whatever you want to say, out somewhere where there's no internet connection or whatever. But before that day, I actually go out there and do tons of testing just to make sure that everything on that the day of they actually need this stuff by, it's going to work. And that was one thing that, I guess I never really learned when I was actually younger. Just like, we'll just figure it out when we get there. We'll just fly by the seat of my pants and we'll figure it out then, But now it's just like, all right, you try to take care of, obviously you probably can't get X, Y, and Z taken care of, but you probably get the majority of them, kind of like 9 out of 10 things that problems you might run into. But yeah, just, little things like that just can make a world of difference on anything going very successfully, not causing so much stress and just ruining a whole event or whatever you're doing right there. But yeah. And then, that's really all I got to say about that one. But number 5 is emotional intelligence. And I've been hearing a lot about this lately, and something that I never even picked up, I guess, until I started podcasting, that how much emotional intelligence actually goes into play and just reading people's body language and their tone and stuff like that. Was that kind of what you were pointing at on that part?
Yeah. So there are a couple of key components. One is having empathy. So really kind of feeling into what's going on with the other person. And then relations and social awareness, and in a social setting, it's the same as knowing what's going on around you, right? So what I think of, you might be too young for this, but do you know the show MASH?
I've heard of it. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a guy on there called Radar, and that's what it's about, is having radar. Like, he always knew what was going on, right? He was like, always like, he knew when the helicopter was coming in before anybody else heard it.
Okay.
So it's that kind of thing, that you're having that connection at a different level. So your emotional awareness is heightened. And that actually is founded in having really solid self-awareness first. So being clear with yourself about your strengths, your opportunities, where there might be gaps and such. And one of the other key components is motivation. And so motivation meaning, or in the aspect of setting good goals for yourself and setting yourself up for success. So those are the main components of having an emotional intelligence.
Do you think, and kind of echoing, or not really echoing, but going along with that, do you think that we're seeing, how do I want to put this? We're seeing that, with screens and email and everything, we're seeing and not creating that actual human connection, and not being able to, we're seeing a lack of actually reading emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And I feel like we're set up to denigrate it in some way, right? Like, it's harder. I think it's going to be harder for the next generation to have emotional intelligence, because the screen time and the lack of connection is not conducive to learning those skills as easily. They'll still learn it, but it'd be a little bit more of a learning curve, I would guess.
Yeah, I can't talk about this a lot personally, just because I haven't had a lot of interaction with it. But from other, people I have seen and talked with, that, they're saying that, younger generations are, for the most part, unable to hold a conversation with somebody at this point unless they have a screen, unless they're doing it through texting or whatever. And just, it's probably not the best skills that they could take with them in the real world, obviously. But yeah.
And it's in smaller sound bites. Okay. So it started with Twitter, which was like 140 characters or whatever to begin with, and then double that. And then, text, you don't usually do a missive. Well, some people I know do, but normally, there's some more sound bites. TikTok, quick, everything. It's just all how we communicate has been condensed in these various forms.
You think, and also just with texting and stuff, you touched on communication, just that we're using, slang terms more and not using actual, I don't know, I guess we're not talking or articulating it better as best that we could.
Well, possibly not, because we're doing shortcuts, and the the amount of time that we have to say something is condensed, right?
Yeah.
So although I have my kids give me a hard time if I say where and the letter R and the letter U, where are you?
Yeah.
They're like, what is that? Like, I'm meant to be spelling it out. And the first time they coached me on that, I thought, seriously? Like, your generation is going to tell me I'm missing a few letters? Yeah. So I think, that to that end, again, they're 24 and 25, and they're, signing off of social media. So I think there's hope that there might be a turnaround to come as well, where people are starting to say, younger people are starting to say, yep, times suck, and I need to get out and interact with people on a different level.
Yeah, social media is still the wild, wild west, I guess you could say, and that people, we were never meant to, and I say we, not me personally, but human beings, I guess, were never meant to obviously be sitting in front of screens 24/7 or whatever it is. And that, just the impact, I guess we're starting to learn what, as far as mental health and what it's doing to people and, like communication, as you just said. And I catch myself on it that, I just mindlessly, I'm probably addicted to as much as anyone else. But, when I start writing emails for at work, I almost start writing as that I'm texting or something. It's like, whoa, now, I guess I can't send that. That there's actually a difference. And that, I used to think that and this is, me personally speaking, because growing up, I never felt like I could hold a conversation very well or, even had the brain power for one. And just that, I guess I kind of lost my train of thought, but it was just because that I felt more comfortable in front of a screen and actually opening myself up to a person and, always being wary of, like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I say something stupid? And, I guess being self-conscious of it all, but yeah. And I guess hopefully, people are starting maybe seeing that, social media is not the end all be all to everything. And that, I know younger people are actually starting to get off Facebook. I have heard that, and they're saying that's the old people's game now. So,
yeah. No, it's true. It's true. And so, first of all, kudos to you for being somebody who thought that, that you had apprehension about discussions, and here you are.
Yeah.
And I'm so thrilled to be on a podcast with you. And you're like running a podcast, for Pete's sake.
Exactly.
So, but I want to talk about that because I wrote a book about the words we choose, and what strikes me about what you just said is, you're there with your headset right now.
Yeah.
Ends up that you have your personal podcast is what was telling you, you might not have the right thing to say, or, back when you felt that way.
Sure.
It's because we have this personal podcast running, and it ends up that you're the producer, director, host, narrator, the whole deal, right?
Sure.
Of that podcast too. And choosing the right words, replacing the words that are minimizing or limiting you is the way to go. And so that's a lot of what I do. So when I say, kind of human potential developers, I help people see that. I help them say, whoa, wait a minute. Like this narrative, maybe it came from my mother, maybe it came from whatever, my grade school teacher, but I don't need to own it now. If it no longer serves me, I can let it go and replace it with some better words.
Yeah, I've had some friends, I've talked with that, they get set in these, I guess you could say, negative behavioral pattern, and that it's, and they're, I don't want to say, I'm not going to talk for them, but they'll say that, well, this is what the way my parents said it. This is the way my grandparents said it. And I was like, well, okay, that doesn't mean you have to do that though. And, I understand that may have been your morals and values growing up, and that's just how, life was in your house. But, and that's what I had to learn, just because, I felt like, again, touching on that, I was very naive with having conversations with somebody, just because I never felt like we had intellectual stimulating conversations with anybody. And so if we got on touchy, and I've talked about this before, so sorry folks, but if we got on some touchy subjects, like right now, what is it, Roe v. Wade? It's like, I'm getting out of here. I'll just go hide. Yeah, I'm hiding in the back. I'm not going to even touch on it. But, and I'm not saying, and then again, that was part of the reason why I started this podcast, just because I wanted to turn that weakness into a strength. And plus, there's a lot of other things, learning to get my thoughts out, connecting with people like you, and giving you a platform to, share your stuff on. And just, it's just so cool, actually, just meeting somebody I never would have probably met in my entire life, going back towards how life is odd or whatever, but just through this, now we got a screen in front of us and we're able to send video through the air and touch, and it's just so wild to me. But yeah, I lost my point on that. But yeah,
your friends being
that's what it was.
Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes, and it's the very beginning of my book, is the guy named Tom Kenyon said, we're creating the world by how we speak to each other. So, okay. Yes. And if we don't speak to each other, like, where does that leave us? Right. So again, kudos to you for opening up the platform to speak to people, to hear different voices.
Yeah.
like when I think about, we will not be talking about Roe v. Wade.
Right.
However, when I think about that or any political things or whatever, part of the trouble that we're in is that people from different backgrounds and within families and this and that have stopped speaking to each other. And when we say, okay, difficult or easy, we're going to continue the conversation, we get to know what people fear and what bothers them and what's important to them at a different level. And so it's all about communicating in the end, like how we exist. That's what sets us apart. I mean, in the animal kingdom, there's communication for sure, but our reasoning and our ability to choose different words and really decide whether or not we're going to choose words that minimize and limit or choose words to elevate and inspire and move things forward, that's a trait that we have alone, right?
Yeah. What do you think about, competence builds confidence?
Oh, yeah. Well, I believe that. And that's certainly been how I came to succeed. I'd have like one thing that I succeeded at. And sometimes people would say, well, you can't do that. You don't know anything about that. But I would do it. And then I would be competent at it. And then I got more confidence. And I'm a huge believer. That's absolutely, Chris, how my life has unfolded is I said, okay, well, I don't know it's true. I don't know anything about this, but I'm going to do it. Right. And then I became competent at it, or let's say semi-competent at it.
There you go.
And then I would get some confidence and move forward. So I do believe in that.
Yeah. That's one of my things that I've somehow got ingrained on me that, even if I didn't know how to do something, that I wanted to learn how to do it. And and I would admit to it, and I feel like, you don't have to lie about it. What is this? Just that if you don't know something, you don't know something, and I'm not an expert in anything on here that I'm talking about, and I don't claim to be, but there's enough information out here that, especially, in living in modern times, that, I can figure out how to get it, whether it be YouTube, university, books, podcasts, whatever. And just that you don't always have to believe everything that you're reading too. You can find out what's working for you. And hey, that makes sense to me. And this doesn't make sense. And then you can go apply that to other things. But yeah, I agree. I agree highly about that. That's another thing I've been learning too, is just that, there's so much information out there. And if I really want to learn something and figure something out, you can do it nowadays.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that has to be allowed. So that has to be allowed in the home, that there are differing opinions and a kid can go learn something. And, I'll give you an example. We homeschooled our kids through the 6th grade, and they went to, as they called it, real school in the 7th grade. We thought it was real all along, but anyway. So off they go, and our son comes back like, I don't know, it was Catholic school. So it was like in Missoula, Montana. It was the only Catholic, college prep school, what have you. And we're not Catholic, Christian, but not Catholic. Anyway, so off they go, and he comes back and he goes, hey, Mom, this is like 2 weeks in. He goes, I met the only other atheist in the school. And I'm like, I didn't even know he knew what that word was. I was like, wait, what? And what do you mean by only other?
Yeah.
And so my point is, there has to be the opportunity to explore. Okay, so what's that mean? And, dig a little deeper, educate yourself, understand that, so on and so forth, particularly as kids are growing up, and if everything's sort of like pushed at them and to them, and they're not evolving at their own pace, then we get a little more conflict than is necessary.
So, I mean, we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but we were talking about something like this, to me and a friend and I at the gym tonight, and about how, if I don't have any kids, I just got 2 dogs. Sometimes you can see them in the background, but if a problem came up, or a situation like that came up to a parent just saying, hey, I think, if I had a son, like, hey, I think I'm a girl, or I want to be a girl, or whatever. But like, how would you, you talk about let's not create conflict, but would you just explore that and allow them to say, or like you said, your son said, I'm an atheist. I mean, to explore that, you go down this road and, okay, let's talk about this, and just not raise conflict, because does that automatically just make this situation go 0 to a ballistic and just cause it way worse than what you ever intended? Then it's almost the son or daughter will just, out of spite, just go that way that they know, just to piss you off or whatever.
Sure. Well, that is a real thing. That is a real thing. Like, and I live that out. So, okay. So what I mean by that is my choice is no, you're not. Like I could have responded like,
Sure.
no, you're not, right?
Sure.
And where would that have gotten us? Right.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
about
fascinating.
exploring what does that mean? And do you really align with that? And why? And let's explore. And so then you have an opportunity to educate as opposed to dictate, right? And then it evolves. And yeah, and I mean my personal approach and my husband's has been that we're open to how they're going to evolve. So when my daughter pulled me aside, we were on a hike and told me that she identified as bisexual and then eventually said, I'm gay, and she's with a female partner now. It didn't come to a surprise to me at all because maybe because she didn't live in a home where that was going to be fussed about. We were going to allow her to evolve as she would. Different circumstance when my sister said the same thing to my parents, right? And so there was conflict. There was like unnecessary. Well, that's me. That's my judgment of it. So that's inappropriate.
That's okay.
It seemed unnecessary to me, and it took some time to evolve. And I get that, based on my parents' experience and such. But yeah, I come from a place where there are almost 8 billion of us right now, Chris.
Yeah, I've read
8 billion
that.
people.
Heard that.
There are 8 billion of us on our own evolutionary path. And so they're going to be different paths. And it's not my way to say, even for my own children, your path must be like this. That would seem really loony to me.
Yeah. I mean, I've had that discussion with my parents too, just because, I mean, we don't have to make this all about this podcast about this now, but yeah, just, because, I guess with everything going on in the world now, just how much it's playing, do you know who Douglas Murray is? He's, I think he's a clinical psychologist and he's an author, but anyway, he had his take on it was that, apparently when when Greek and Roman civilizations fell apart, it was just because they got onto this whole gender rules and gender aspects. And that's why he's not saying this is going to happen in America, but he said that's kind of, history repeating itself. It almost seems just because of all the situations it's coming along. But, I did ask, my mom one day, I was like, what if I would have said that when I was younger, how would have been? And it was almost that, kind of like, it would have been a huge conflict. And then that's when she asked me the same thing. What would you have done? I was like, well, I think you just got to let them explore it, and, there's enough information out there just to, ask them, well, why do you think that? Did you just think that because somebody else at school said that and now you're just trying to fit in or what? But yeah, like I said, we don't have to go down that situation, but it was just on my thoughts or that topic, but it was just on my head tonight because for whatever reason we were talking about the gender. Like, oh, that's why we're talking about the gender, because there was another teacher down there talking about how much gender and roles like that are playing in high schools now, and it's just almost they don't know which pronouns to use and what it's like living in a high school situation now. So anyway.
Right. All right. Well, I'm going to take you back to something that you just said when you said why. When why is that important to you or whatever? I'm going to take you back to word choices because I think that might be helpful to your listeners.
Cool.
So when we ask why, it can appear judgy. Why do you believe that? Or why did you vote for him? Or, what have you. It's like, why didn't you do the dishes tonight? Dude, listen, the dishes are still dirty.
Yeah, what's up with that, bro?
Right. So when we ask why, even if it's not your intention to be judgy, it can appear judgy. And so I'm on this huge mission, Chris, to get people to ask questions starting with what or how. Because when you do that, you're peeling back the layers of what exists. So what appeals to you about that candidate? What policies are important to them that align with yours or your values or whatever? How do you see things changing in our city if we elect that police chief? So if you're in the political conversation, what and how gets you to a place of understanding? But politics aside, if you were doing a one-on-one with an employee that reported to you, asking them, peeling back what and how, and then the other key phrase is tell me. So, tell me, let's say, why was that project? Why is the project behind and we're not going to meet the deadline? Judgy, right?
Makes sense.
What obstacles have we, the alternative would be, what obstacles have we have you incurred that might affect the meeting of the deadline? So now I'm interested and I'm peeling back with you in a conversation, the what and how, or tell me about the obstacles or what have you. And then the other key thing about tell me is that regardless of what the person says, like we would be a better place, period, in this world if someone spoke and we asked them what and how, so a deeper probing question, and then they spoke, and then we leaned in and said, tell me more. So that is active listening at its best, and it's really that level of engagement. So it works really well with children. I wish I would have known to do this more actively when my kids were smaller, but I'm hip to it now.
I've never heard that before, but I guess the way you put it though, why can sound pretty judgy. And I was just thinking about situations in my life, right, where something happened and I was like, why? I was like, now that does sound pretty judgy. Like, well, why'd you do that? Why didn't you do that? But and I don't know if that's just because, what are the big five, like the who, what, when, where, and why? I guess that was just because I always thought that's what the questions you're supposed to ask or whatever. But it does sound pretty judgy.
Well, it does. Well, if you do any kind of like Lean or Six Sigma or that kind of thing, when you're trying to streamline processes, then you ask the 5 whys. So you ask why like 5 times methodically to distill the importance of a process. But that's way different. Like when you're speaking to somebody and you're conversing and you want to really get to, if you do truly really want to get their opinion and to understand, then what and how is going to get you to a deeper place.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that it's almost a humbling experience because, in my experience, I've had people come up and say, well, why don't we do it this way? Why are we performing this policy this way? And it's just like, well, why do you see it that? Well, now I say why, but it's like, well, tell me about that then. Like why? I keep saying why now. I'm so like, but well, let's go over it. Why would this be better than what we're doing it currently now? But it makes sense that take a deep dive on here and just you might have some fresh eyes on it, seeing something that you don't see, and and it could be one of those things that. Speaking of this, is one of those things that I've always hated. Like when I've asked questions like, "Hey, why don't we try to do it this way from now on? This might be improve it." And I've always hated when people say, "Well, we've always done it this way." It don't mean it's better. I don't mean it's great. I mean, but yeah, that used to irk me from no end, especially when I would run something up the flagpole, in my job or whatever. Can we try this? And, nah, we've always done it this way. We can't do that. I was like, fine. Let's just go stay like this, be stagnant. So, but yeah, it blows my mind. So,
yeah.
But I guess that goes back towards number 3, like with change and stuff that, I guess a lot of people are kind of scared of change, but because they just want things. What are we a creature of habits? Does that kind of coincide with it?
Yeah. And how you get to what the fear is, like that's like developing humans. So it's my job to go deeper to understand what the fear is. I can't learn that by asking why. Why are you afraid of that? Like that's how my parents would have been inclined to ask me. But if they say, what happened the last time you experienced this? Or how did that make you feel? And they, what and how me? Like I do this with my hands, which your listeners can't see, but I do this because I'm like peeling back the layers of an onion. Right? Like that's how I feel. You're like, what, how, tell me. And then you get to the heart of the situation. Whereas why is like, whoop, right to the middle, you're going to get one answer and you're done. And you might not have gotten the truth of the matter. Right?
Well, that seems like a better way of actually talking with somebody who is not more like an extrovert, would be more of an introvert, right? Rather than if you just peel back little by little, like an onion, that, you'll finally, like you just say, get to the root of the problem rather than just saying like, because most people might shy away from like when I was saying earlier, I would shy away from conversation or just being scared to say, what was on my mind. But that seems, because, you could peel a little bit and get to the root of the problem. And, it's like, okay, this is making sense now. Now we're getting on somewhere rather than just dismissing it right off. Just like, all right, we'll work on it later.
Yeah. And for the introverts, the tell me more is the key phrase, right?
Yeah.
So somebody's talking, they just want to listen in, what have you. So whatever you're saying, and they lean in and say, tell me more. Like they're off the hook for saying it. They're like, and the person keeps going. Right.
Well, and also, makes them feel like their voice is being heard, and that's one thing, I've also dealt with. And in my work experiences and life experiences that, I would give my opinion or, say, obviously what I was thinking about the situation, and it would just be rejected, and it would just be kind of like put to the side. It's like, well, what the hell did you even ask me for then? I mean, if you were just going to dismiss it, and I mean, I hate it when, again, it's not just, we've always done it this way, but you ask for opinions or one would ask for opinions or better, how do we improve stuff? Better policies, better practices. You give them out and like, all right, we'll just continue doing the same thing. And I mean, was that just because that was your leadership style, or one was leadership style, just and you were trying to make us feel included? It worked backwards now to me.
Right. Because it's easier. So it's sort of giving lip service to including others, to some sense of inclusion, but it's not actually including the voices.
Is that
Yeah.
Is that like a leadership tactic or
No,
that's kind of people?
it's a bad tactic.
Yeah, that's what I think of it. But
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if people picked that up somewhere, along the way and just said, "Oh, talk with your people like this, and ultimately just go do things your way, your team this way, and go do things your way."
I see it a little bit differently. I see that everybody's running really fast, so they're like, spinning their wheels, and and then somebody says, "We got this new thing coming up. Be sure to ask your team about it." And so the person's like, "Ask team about it," and they go, "Hey, what about this? Blah blah blah." Checkbox. I asked team about it, but they don't do anything about it.
Exactly.
Right. So it's more of a like an exercise.
Yeah. That sounds better than what I said. But yeah, because I'm all for change. I believe if you're not changing, you're not growing. And as long as the change is good, if it's going to a positive direction. Now, I guess you might ask, well, how do you know if it's going to be a positive direction? Well, I mean, just because you change something, I guess, doesn't mean you can't revert it back. And at least you say you could try it. Like, okay, it didn't work. Let's move on. We'll figure something else out. And I think it's just because, I've noticed that, college coaches, I've read about this, when they were recruiting players to come to college for basketball, they didn't want to text their players, but that was then going back to social media and stuff. But most of the recruits, that's all they wanted to do was text. They didn't want to pick up the phone. So, these older coaches just learned to start texting. It's like, hey, this is how we got to recruit now. So you got to stay with the times and technology and everything.
Yeah. So here's the big piece of that is that it's all about perspective, right? So that's what you're talking about. The older person had the perspective, I want to do it like this. And, the change was ruffling their feathers and such. So I advise that one thinks about how to reframe things so that they can get their head and their heart around the perspective. So for example, something horrible happens, or now you have to text instead of this, and you're whatever, like a scenario happens, that scenario, whatever. I believe you can do three things. You can say, what's a positive that'll come of this? So let's take the texting. The person says, what's a positive? I'll get my answer faster. I'll connect in the manner that they want to connect, what have you. So then the second thing you ask yourself is, what am I learning? What do I learn from this circumstance? And in the texting situation, they're learning a new skill. They're learning how to connect with people in a different generation. And then the third thing is, based on what I decided was positive and what I'm learning, how will that inform how I respond? So that's how you reframe any circumstance. I've helped people do this where they have to lay off 500 people. Like, wow, that's horrible, right? So, but now to get your head around it and reframe it, what's a positive that might come of this? What will the team stand to learn? And I've literally worked through this. And then therefore, how does the positive and the learning inform how I'll respond? And it's a way to reframe. And it's actually sort of components of resilience too. When a circumstance happens or a bad thing happens and you're able to run it through that filter, then you're going to come out in a better place.
Can a positive be taken from when a person has to say, hey, we're laying off 500 people? Is it?
Well, it's a perspective. So it's not a positive for anybody involved, but they're trying to think now, yes and no. I have been involved, and I know many people who have been involved in such things and said, thank God. That was like the best thing that ever happened to me. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Where sometimes it's like the light at the end of the tunnel, what have you. So one positive would be that some people will welcome this change. It's as simple as that, right? Yeah. So that would be a positive.
Huh. because I was just thinking, the first time I actually had to fire one of my student employees, it's like, it was tough, because, I didn't like being the monster, no, but, and I was still, and I don't like confrontation, but I knew I had to, again, turn that weakness into a strength in order to grow. But it's like, after leaving, I was like, God, I just felt like the worst person in the world. And it was just because it was something stupid. I think, because they missed 3 shifts or whatever in a row. And it's like, I gotta let you go, man. And then, I can't just let you do this. And like everybody else think that, you can miss all the shifts you want, people to stay on board with that. And I was like, so I was almost me, like one of my proving, I don't want to say having to prove myself, but I just knew I felt like I had to do it. I guess while you were talking, I was like, well, I guess that was a positive. At least I grew from it and learned that, okay, I can have these tough situations and conversations. So,
well, I'm going to give you a few more.
Ooh,
you also showed to the other people that you're going to hold the team accountable, because the other people are like, wait a minute, what gives that this person's always late? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not, yeah. So the positive is that you upheld the expectations that are expected of everybody. And so in my perspective is that person chose, if you were clear about the expectations, that person chose not to follow them.
Sure.
So so you were doing your job in pointing that out. And then when you had to point it out the third time, there was a consequence. So a positive is that you were capable of upholding the consequence and the accountability of what the whole team was expected to do.
Yeah. One thing that's always kind of also resonated with me is like, somebody asked me one time, I don't know if it was an interview or in grad school or what, but, should a leader be respected or feared? And, and I thought about that and I was like, well, I don't want them to fear me just based because, if they fear me, then at what cost is that causing, the workplace culture, the actual quality of the work getting done itself? But respected makes sense, and just that, I knew that, going into this sorry, my dog's going crazy, going into this new role or whatever at that time, because, I was roughly 25, I think, and they were all college age too. And I was relating to them, but I was like, I want to be seen. I don't want to be seen as a pushover, but I want to be respected. And I want to show that, kind of what you were saying that, hey, I want to hold people accountable. I want this place to actually, because I've always never wanted to ask somebody something to do something I wasn't willing to do myself.
Yeah.
And that was the only way I've actually known that, I would treat people the way I would want to be treated and stuff that, and if you make mistakes, own up to your mistakes and be responsible for them. And whether good or bad, like you were saying, there's going to be a positive and negative from it, but you end up growing from it. So.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you chose respected.
Yeah.
I was like, right answer.
Well,
ding, ding.
and just because, I don't want to overshare on here, but, when I got one of my first jobs when I was 16 years old, everybody was always, when the big boss would come down the stairs, it was at a manufacturing plant. And, everyone would just instantly just sit up straight and they would just be like acting like they're just writing stuff down. And like, I was like, what are y'all doing? It's like, oh, he's coming. And I was like, he'll say something. He might fire you if he sees you just goofing off or whatever. And I was like, I just remember thinking like, why is it y'all are afraid of him? And then I was like, God, y'all work. Is this how y'all usually work? And, I don't know if that was my subconscious that's keeping that in my brain, but I just remember this. I never wanted somebody to always, be fearful of me, but I wanted the respect, but it's just because it never, I don't know. I can't think of a fearful leader off the top of my head, but, I just didn't want people just being, I hate stress. I try to live a stress-free life, and you don't want people living, or I don't want people living completely stressed out and just causing the quality of their work to, go down. I've always thought if I was able to create something or whatever, become an entrepreneur of a business or whatever, that, I'd want people to feel good about coming to work,
Yeah.
And I mean, that might be easier said than done just because I've never done it before, but that just makes the most sense to me about how you would get the most out of a team.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's no value in the fear.
Yeah.
It serves no purpose. It serves nobody.
I was like, I'm not a mob gangster here. Just, you'd be sleeping with the fishes if you mess up tonight or whatever. But it just blew my mind that there's actually that. I guess that was one of the first times I realized there is people like that who are just in fearful of their jobs 24/7. And, because, we're human, obviously, and we mess up. I mess up all the time. I've had bad podcasts. I say something stupid on here. Then, I'll go away like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Or maybe I could have said that a different way. So yeah, just, that's what I try to get out there. And I feel like that resonates with most people, but I could be wrong on that, but.
Yeah, why? And I would say if there's somebody listening and it doesn't resonate, they should take stock. They should go back to that emotional intelligence and dig a little deeper into the self-awareness and say, why am I living in a not why? I'm living in a place of fear. What's that based on? And how can I change that? And really dig a little bit deeper into the foundation of that fear, because it really, it's so unhealthy. This doesn't serve the individual or those around them, right? Particularly if you're a leader.
No,
So,
it doesn't do
yeah.
anything for them. And, just, when building those connections and those, workplace, I guess, relationships, I mean, not actual, just so, work friendly relationship or whatever, not an actual one, but, you're spending most of your time with those people compared to your family in most cases. That's not all cases, but most cases, yeah, roughly 40 hours a week you're spending with them compared to whenever you get home. So yeah, having those healthy relationships and connections can go a long way, and just, yeah, I think about that when somebody, leaves, like when people leave these podcasts or whatever, I've always thought about when I want somebody, somebody to feel good about how the conversation went and we part ways and whatever. Just like, that was great. That felt good. But rather than just, just that, I didn't like the way that went, that was just awful. There was no connection. I didn't see anything happening on there. I don't even know why I did that. But that was one of the things that, like, well, like if you want to talk about leadership skills or whatever, I can ingrain this on, daily life almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Parenting.
Parenting. There we go.
Everything. Yeah, I know I keep going back to the parenting.
That's fine.
It's not like I've got little kids, but,
No.
but it's just like it's human nature. I mean, all the things that we're talking about is, like the fear serves, there's no value in it, and how to communicate with each other. It's life. It's not just being a leader. It's not just at home. It's across the board, and really feel strongly that our country, maybe even our world, would be in a better place if we were communicating at a higher level, right?
And just doing that communication and, and I don't even know and connecting with more, but just, I recently just got my 10-year anniversary where I'm currently working, and just, they gave us a free lunch or whatever. And I was like, this is it, but I mean, it was good.
They might be listening.
Yeah, they might be. I shouldn't have said it. Well, I mean, it was good lunch. It was great. I mean, it was better than nothing, but, I guess what I was getting at was that, if I ever had employees and stuff that, how people say, oh, we're going to have a pizza party tonight. Thank you for all your work. And I was like, do people really appreciate those little things? Or is it just like, it's free food, I guess, I guess we'll just take what we can get, but because that was me, I was like 10 years. I mean, that was great. I got a certificate, and I'm very, I'm very fortunate. I'm not, I'm very fortunate to have that job and blessed, but yeah, I was immediately thinking, I kept wondering, like, what other people were thinking. There's some of them were there 5 years, and some of them didn't even need to. I think we got chicken or something. We ain't eating this. But yeah.
All right. So here's my recommendation. If I were in your shoes, I would share that with somebody. When you were talking before about people ask my opinion and then nothing happens or whatever, I'd put myself out there and I'd say, hey, and so I'm going to do another word thing for you.
Okay.
Remember, wrote the book on the words you choose.
Sure.
You just said, if I ever have employees. You've said it twice, actually.
Okay.
I would encourage you to say, when I have employees.
Ooh.
Right?
You're not the first person to say something like that to me.
Right. So you want to speak in terms of the direction in which you're going, like Wayne Gretzky, like go to where the puck's going.
Ooh.
Right. So if you're playing, that was his big quote. So do you know field hockey, ice hockey, right? So when you're so when you're playing ice hockey, like it's gonna hit the wall like pool, but it's gonna ricochet with the angle. It's gonna go like completely different. So go where the puck's going, not like where most people go, like where it's going to hit the wall, not where it's going. And so when you're going where it's going, you're going to speak instead of if, you're going to speak in terms of when.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with that. And I don't know if that's my, if I'm too much of a realist or, I'm just not thinking about my future quite right, or whatever. But I do catch myself even doing that multiple times. But even, before my workouts, like I have a competition that's coming up this weekend, and that I notice that it's something inside me. I'll catch myself doing it, but it's like, all right, right here, start talking to yourself more positively. Say, hey, I am going to make this lift, or hey, I am going to crush this workout, or whatever. And I don't know if it's just me, I can't get out of my own way sometimes. But yeah, it's tough for me sometimes.
It's your personal podcast. So
There you go.
it's your
Yeah, there you go.
podcast.
There you go.
And your job is to switch up the words. So when you hear like can't or should or won't or any of those ones that are limiting, that you switch as soon as you hear them, like because it's like you can see them coming, and you start to hear and you go like whoa, like whoa, this is my narrative, this is my show. Like we're gonna say can and will, and much more assertive, much more forward thinking.
Yeah, and I've talked about this on here before, but Mike Tyson, boxer,
Yeah.
but he would talk about himself like he'd be so worried about everything in the locker room and just self-doubting himself and having these negative thoughts. But actually, when he actually started to make his way to the ring, he would actually change that, and he would call himself a god right then, and he's like, and instantly he's like, everything changed. But yeah, it was just, I don't know, I can't remember what it was, but once he did that, he knew that he was on. Once he just spoke those words.
Well, no one can avoid it. Like regardless of who you are, you can't avoid that negative talk. It's the most successful people are simply better at switching it out. It starts to come, it comes out of nowhere, and they go like, yeah, no, that ain't true. And then the thing is, you have to replace it with something. You can't just go like, that ain't true, and throw it out the window. It needs to be replaced with something that you keep saying and keep repeating and believing, and then you can lift X number of pounds or whatever, because you can. You told yourself you could.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal. For as long as you tell yourself you can't do something, you're right.
Ooh.
Right.
That is it right there. Okay.
As simple as that. Yeah. For as long as you say, I can't do this, you will always be right.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, I'll write that down.
Right. So the opposite happens. The minute you start telling yourself you can, and when you have employees, it'll happen.
Yeah. I think it's a lot, and I know we kind of get short on time right here, but I think that's a lot because, growing up, that it was always, how should I put this? That, it was always, hey, take the steady path. Don't take a chance on something, have a plan B. It was like, if you told somebody like, well, hey, I plan on being CEO of Microsoft one day, it's like, well, probably not going to happen. You don't have the brain power. And I was like, oh, well, you shot that down real quick. But, and it was just, I think that's probably part of what it was. I grew up in a real small town, and nothing against that though, but it was, one of those things that, if you made it out or whatever, you kind of did okay for yourself. But it was kind of one of those things, you'll probably just end up at one of the manufacturing plants and just live out your life there. So I think just kind of subconsciously, and like some of that's still ingrained, and maybe that's maybe it could just be my personality. I don't know, but I think it's something that most people deal with, and it's just hard to be like I said earlier. Somebody once told me that I was my own worst enemy, and I believe that. And it's one of those things like that. And I'm glad you called me out on it, because when I actually catch myself out on it, it's like, Chris, stop doing that, dude. You're better than that. Have some self confidence. And so yeah.
So here's the question that I asked myself, and I'll leave you with this: is like, what purpose does that serve, or what value is there? Like when you hear this talk going on and you're like, wait, where'd that come from? This is what I ask myself. I'm like, well, what purpose does that serve to believe that, whatever that thing is, right? Or what value is there in believing that? And then I usually go, yeah, none. And then I switch it out with what is of value to me and my future, or what have you, or those around me, or what have you. And then I will know to switch it out. So that's the question to ask.
Yeah, just to touch on that real quick. Somebody else told me something like that one time, and just that if you ever start doing that, just put a red stop sign up in your brain and just say stop and go the other way and go back the way you were. But
that's right.
But this was great. Why don't you take the time and plug in all your stuff, and if people want to find you and your books and all that good stuff, how do they do that?
All right. Well, I'm kind of laughing that it's turning dark while we're talking.
I saw like your lights are going out. I was like, how long have we been talking?
I was like, wait a minute. So you like that? It's because the windows they're still all open, but it's getting dark. Anyway, so my book is called The Words We Choose: Your Guide to How and Why Words Matter. It's on Amazon and all the places that one can order such a book. And my website is Thriving Leader, singular, collaborative.com. And that's where I do leadership development and have retreats and such. And my email is Terre, spelled Terre, at shortgroup.net, in case somebody wants to contact me directly.
Cool.
Would be awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you again. I'm glad you took the time out for me to get some of these thoughts out and explore some of these ideas. This was fun for me. So
It was fun for me too. No,
Good,
and I
good,
loved it.
good.
I could talk to you forever. So
Yeah, I
let's
felt like
do it
I was
again
like,
sometime.
that'd be great. I felt like there was a couple more things I had written down here that I want to explore, and I was like, well, we'll do a part 2 sometime. So
Sounds
anyway,
good.
anything else you want to say before we call it a night?
No, before it gets completely dark and you can't see me. I'll have to get up and turn the lights on. No, it's totally good. And best of luck to you. I can't wait until you have a team of employees.
All right. Thank you about that. All right. Bye, everybody. We're out of here.
Take care.